Admiral Vexthera's mandibles clicked in satisfaction as she watched the final human ship explode into brilliant fragments across the main display. The bridge of her flagship erupted in celebration, her crew's bioluminescent patches flashing in patterns of victory and triumph. After 3 years of brutal warfare, the stubborn species from the third planet of Sol had finally been crushed. All human vessels destroyed, Admiral, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kreenox. His crystalline exoskeleton gleamed under the bridge lights as he manipulated the holographic displays. Confirmed debris signatures matched the last of their fleet. Total enemy casualties, approximately 47,000. Vexthera's 4 eyes focused on the scattered wreckage floating in the void near the human colony of New Geneva. The once proud settlement now lay in ruins, its orbital stations reduced to twisted metal, and its defensive platforms silenced forever. It had taken the combined might of 3 Galactic Council fleets to break the humans' desperate last stand, but the price had been worth paying. "Excellent work, all of you," the Admiral announced, her voice carrying across the bridge through both audible frequencies and the subsonic harmonics her species used for emphasis. "Signal the Council fleet commanders. Tell them the human threat has been eliminated. Earth's children will trouble the galaxy no more." The victory had been hard-won. These humans had proven far more resourceful and vicious than the Council's initial assessments had predicted. When first contact had been made 18 months ago, the Galactic Council had approached Earth with their standard offer of membership. The terms were simple and had been accepted by hundreds of species across the galaxy. Submit to Council authority, contribute resources and technology to the greater good, and accept the wisdom of more advanced civilizations. Most species saw the logic immediately. Why struggle alone when they could benefit from the collective knowledge and protection of thousands of worlds? The Council offered peace, prosperity, and advancement beyond what any single planet could achieve. It was an offer that had never been refused in the 12,000 years since the Council's founding. The humans had been different. They had listened to the offer with what seemed like polite interest, asked thoughtful questions about the terms, and then delivered their response through their representative, a steel-eyed woman named Director Sarah Chun. The memory still burned in Vexthera's mind. "We appreciate your offer, but humanity must respectfully decline. We choose to remain independent." Such arrogance, such foolishness. The Council had tried to explain the reality of their situation. Earth was a young world with primitive technology, barely capable of traveling between the planets of their own system. They had no allies, no knowledge of the greater galaxy's dangers, no understanding of the forces that could crush them without effort. Independence was not an option for species at their level of development. The humans had remained unmoved. Director Chun had simply repeated their refusal and suggested that perhaps future generations might reconsider when circumstances changed. The Council delegation had left Earth with regret, knowing what must come next. 3 species had tried to resist Council authority in recent history. The crystalline Velnari of the Centaurus cluster had believed their mineral-based biology made them superior to organic life. Their worlds were now mining colonies, their people reduced to a few thousand individuals who served as living computers. The gaseous Etherians had thought their lack of physical form made them untouchable. Their energy matrices now powered Council space stations. The militant Krexnathi had boasted that their warrior culture made them invincible. Their homeworld was a monument to the futility of resisting Council will. Humanity would join that list of cautionary tales. The war had begun 6 months later when human ships were detected beyond their solar system, violating Council territory. The first engagement had been intended as a demonstration, a show of overwhelming force that would convince the humans to reconsider their position. 3 Council cruisers against 1 human exploration vessel should have ended with immediate surrender. Instead, the humans had fought like cornered predators. Their ship had been outgunned and outmatched, but they had somehow managed to damage 1 cruiser before being destroyed. The surviving crew had transmitted a final message that had puzzled council analysts. Tell them we're coming. More disturbing had been the discovery of the human ship's technology. While primitive by council standards, it showed signs of rapid advancement that should have taken decades to achieve. Their weapons were crude, but effective, their armor was inadequate but cleverly designed, and their electronics were basic but surprisingly resistant to council disruption systems. The council's response had been swift and decisive. A full battle fleet had been dispatched to Seoul with orders to secure human submission or eliminate the threat entirely. What followed had been the most challenging campaign the Council had faced in generations. Humanity's home system had been transformed into a fortress. Every planet, moon, and asteroid had been weaponized. Earth itself bristled with orbital defense platforms that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Mars had become a shipyard producing vessels at an impossible rate. The asteroid belt had been turned into a maze of hidden weapons platforms and automated defense drones. The humans had also demonstrated an unsettling willingness to sacrifice themselves for strategic advantage. Council forces had learned to be wary of any human vessel that appeared damaged or disabled, as they frequently turned out to be carrying massive explosive charges. Entire human crews would pilot their ships directly into Council formations, detonating with enough force to cripple dreadnoughts. But perhaps most disturbing had been the rate of human technological advancement. Each engagement revealed new innovations, new tactics, new weapons that shouldn't have existed. Their learning curve was impossibly steep, as if they were absorbing and improving upon Council technology almost instantaneously. The siege of Seoul had lasted 18 months. 3 times the Council had broken through the outer defenses, only to face increasingly desperate and creative resistance. The humans had used everything from nuclear weapons to relativistic kinetic strikes, to clouds of self-replicating nanobots. They had even attempted to ram a converted asteroid into the Council's command vessel, missing by mere kilometers. Finally, Admiral Vexthera had convinced the Council to authorize the deployment of quantum disruption weaponry. The exotic devices could destabilize matter at the subatomic level, making them capable of destroying entire planets if necessary. It was a weapon of last resort, typically reserved for the most extreme threats. The mere threat of such weapons had finally broken human resistance. Faced with the total annihilation of Earth and its 11 billion inhabitants, the human leadership had agreed to a final battle in neutral space. They would gather their remaining fleet for one last engagement, with the understanding that defeat would mean the end of human independence. The battle had taken place here, in the void between stars. 47,000 humans and 200 ships had faced 3 Council fleets, totaling nearly 500,000 warriors in over 1,000 vessels. The outcome had never been in doubt, but the humans had fought with their characteristic ferocity until the very end. Now it was over. The galaxy was safe from human ambition and human unpredictability. The Council's authority remained unchallenged, and the natural order of civilization could continue undisturbed. Admiral called Communications Officer Zinthara, her tentacles writhing with agitation. I'm receiving priority transmissions from the Council chambers. The representatives are requesting immediate confirmation of victory. Vexthera's satisfaction deepened. The Council had been following the campaign with great interest, particularly after the humans' unexpected resistance. Some members had even begun to question whether the extermination order had been necessary. Today's victory would silence such doubts permanently. Open a channel to the Council, she commanded. Full spectrum transmission, maximum priority. The main display shifted to show the great amphitheater on Nexus Prime, the Council's seat of power. Representatives from 1,000 species filled the vast chamber, their various forms creating a tapestry of evolutionary diversity. At the center sat the inner circle, the 12 eldest and wisest species who guided Council policy. High Counselor Mordeth, ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species, leaned forward on his crystalline throne. His form was barely recognizable as once having been organic, millennia of technological enhancement having transformed him into something more machine than creature. Admiral Vextera. His voice resonated through quantum fields rather than mere sound waves. We await your report. Honored counselors, Vextera began, her chest swelling with pride. I am pleased to report total victory over the human forces. Their fleet has been eliminated, their colonies destroyed, and their homeworld lies defenseless. The threat to council authority has been ended. A wave of satisfaction rippled through the chamber. Some representatives began the complex vocalizations that served as applause among their kind. Others flashed bioluminescent patterns of approval. The insectoid hive queens released pheromones of contentment that their translation devices converted to harmonic tones. Counselor Serthak of the hegemony raised one of his 6 arms. Casualties, Admiral, minimal, honored counselor. We lost 12 vessels with total crew casualties under 8,000. The humans fought tenaciously, but were simply outmatched by our superior numbers and technology. More sounds of approval echoed through the chamber. 8,000 lives was considered a remarkably light cost for eliminating an entire species' military capability. Some council campaigns had cost millions of lives to subdue far less dangerous opponents. The human homeworld? Asked Counselor Vexnera, her metallic voice carrying harmonics of curiosity. Intact but defenseless, honored counselor. Earth population remains unharmed as per council protocols. They pose no further threat and can be processed according to standard procedures. The processing of defeated species was a well-established routine. The planet would be occupied by council forces, the population relocated to designated zones, and the most useful individuals selected for training in council-approved roles. Earth's biosphere would be cataloged and preserved where possible, while the planet's resources would be integrated into the Council's economic network. High Counselor Mordeth gestured with one mechanical limb. Excellent work, Admiral. The Council commends your efficiency in resolving this unfortunate necessity. The human example will serve as a valuable lesson to any future species who might consider the folly of resistance. Vextera bowed her head in acknowledgement. Thank you, honored counselor. It was my privilege to serve the Council's will. Begin standard occupation procedures. Mordeth continued. Establish orbital control of the human homeworld and begin population assessments. We must determine how best to integrate the survivors into our civilization. It will be done, honored counselor. The transmission ended, leaving Vextera alone with her thoughts of triumph. Around her, the bridge crew continued their victory celebrations while scanning for salvageable technology among the human wreckage. It would be interesting to study their weapons and defensive systems more closely. Perhaps some of their innovations could be adapted for council use. Admiral, Lieutenant Kreenox approached with a data tablet clutched in his claws. We've completed our analysis of the human ships. There are some unusual readings I thought you should see. Vextera accepted the device and studied the displayed information. The energy signatures were indeed strange, showing quantum fluctuations that didn't match any known drive technology. What do you make of these readings, Lieutenant? Unknown, ma'am. The humans appear to have been using some form of exotic matter in their reactor cores. It's unlike anything in our databases. Interesting. Perhaps the humans had stumbled onto something genuinely new in their desperate attempts to match council technology. Such discoveries were rare, but not unprecedented among species facing extinction. Fear had a way of driving innovation to remarkable extremes. Catalog everything, she ordered. The science division will want to study any novel technologies. Even defeated enemies can occasionally teach us something useful. A proximity alarm suddenly echoed across the bridge. Vextera looked up from the tablet to see her sensor operator frantically manipulating his controls, his bioluminescent patches flashing patterns of confusion and concern. Report, she commanded sharply. Admiral, I'm detecting spatial distortions approximately 50,000 kilometers off our port bow. The readings they're massive, ma'am. Something's happening to space-time itself. Vexthara moved to the sensor station, her four eyes focusing intently on the displays. The readings were indeed massive, showing gravitational waves that suggested something enormous was moving through folded space. But that was impossible. The area had been thoroughly scanned after the battle, and nothing remained except debris and the Council's own forces. All ships, battle stations, she ordered as a precautionary measure. Something's coming. The distortions grew stronger, and suddenly, space itself seemed to tear open like fabric. A rift appeared in the void, edges crackling with energies that made the ship's sensors scream warnings about dangerous radiation levels. Through the tear, Vexthara could see something that made her blood run cold. Ships, thousands upon thousands of ships, stretching away into infinity within what appeared to be a pocket dimension. They were human in design, but unlike anything that had participated in the battle. These vessels were larger, more advanced, bristling with weapons that radiated power signatures beyond anything in the Council's arsenal. A voice suddenly filled the bridge, transmitted on all frequencies simultaneously. It was calm, measured, and utterly human. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Federation Fleet. We are here to collect our people." Admiral Vexthara's mandibles clicked involuntarily as she stared at the impossible sight before her. The tear in space continued to widen, revealing more and more of the vast human fleet hidden within what could only be described as a pocket dimension. The ships that emerged defied everything the Council knew about human technology. "Impossible," whispered Lieutenant Kreenox, his crystalline exoskeleton dimming with shock. "The humans had no ships of this class. Our intelligence was complete." The vessels pouring through the dimensional rift were massive, easily dwarfing the largest Council dreadnoughts. Their hulls gleamed with an oily iridescence that suggested exotic matter construction, and weapon ports lined their surfaces like the scales of some cosmic predator. Energy readings from the lead ship alone exceeded the combined output of Vexthara's entire fleet. "Admiral Chun." Vexthara forced herself to speak into the communications array, though her voice carried a tremor she couldn't suppress. "I don't know what deception this is, but the human fleet was destroyed. I watched your ships burn." A low chuckle echoed across the bridge, carrying undertones that seemed to resonate in frequencies beyond normal hearing. "Did you really think we would commit our entire species to a single engagement? How disappointingly naive." On the main display, a figure materialized through quantum entanglement communication technology that shouldn't have existed outside Council laboratories. The woman was unmistakably human, but she wore a uniform that radiated authority and confidence. Her hair had gone silver, and her eyes held depths that spoke of terrible knowledge. "Allow me to introduce myself properly," Sarah Chun continued, her image standing calmly as chaos erupted around her on what was clearly the bridge of an unimaginably advanced warship. "Admiral Sarah Chun, commanding the 1st Expeditionary Fleet of the Terran Federation. The people you just murdered were colonists and volunteers, brave souls who bought us the time we needed." Vexthara's four eyes widened as the implications hit her like a physical blow. "You used them as bait." "We used them as heroes," Chun corrected, her voice carrying steel beneath the measured tones. "Every man, woman, and child who died today did so knowing their sacrifice would save billions more. They volunteered for the colonization programs, knowing they might never see Earth again. They died believing their deaths would teach the galaxy an important lesson about underestimating humanity." The Council fleet around Vexthara's flagship began to stir as more ships detected the spatial anomalies. Warning signals flashed across tactical displays as sensor operators struggled to count the vessels emerging from the rift. The numbers kept climbing: 1,000 ships, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. "This is impossible," Vexthara repeated, though her certainty was crumbling with each passing moment. "Our scouts surveyed your entire system. Earth's industrial capacity couldn't support this level of construction." Chun smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. Your scouts were very thorough. They mapped every planet, every moon, every asteroid in the Sol system. What they didn't find were the manufacturing facilities we'd already moved into parallel dimensions. The revelation struck the bridge crew like a thunderbolt. Parallel dimensional technology was theoretical even for the most advanced Council species. The energy requirements alone should have been beyond any single-planet civilization. Impossible, breathed the tactical officer. The quantum calculations necessary for stable dimensional rifts require computational power beyond what you thought we possessed, Chun interrupted, somehow hearing the conversation across the communication link. You made several crucial miscalculations about human capabilities. The first was assuming that our apparent technological level represented our actual capabilities. More ships continued to emerge from the dimensional tear. These were not just warships, Vexthera realized with growing horror. Some were clearly industrial vessels, mobile factories the size of small moons. Others appeared to be colony ships, vast arcs capable of carrying entire populations. The logistics of maintaining such a fleet boggled the mind. The second mistake, Chen continued, was assuming that a species capable of interstellar travel would confine itself to a single star system. Humanity has been expanding beyond Sol for over a century. What you attacked was our public face, our diplomatic presence. The colonies you've been destroying were our expendable assets. A new voice cut across the bridge communications. This time, Vexthera recognized it as coming from the council chambers on Nexus Prime. High Counselor Mordeth's mechanical tones carried overtones of confusion and growing alarm. Admiral Vexthera, explain these readings immediately. Our deep space sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout Council space. What is the meaning of this? Before Vexthera could respond, Chen's image turned slightly, as if addressing the Council directly through the communication link. Honored Counselors, allow me to clarify the situation. While your fleets were celebrating their victory over our decoy forces, the Real Terran Federation has been positioning assets throughout your territory. The tactical display suddenly exploded with new contacts as cloaked human vessels revealed themselves across Council space. They materialized near major Council worlds, space stations, and fleet positions like ghosts stepping out of shadow. The scope of the operation was breathtaking in its complexity and scale. Stealth technology, gasped Lieutenant Kreenox. But our sensors should have detected any cloaking system. Your sensors are calibrated for technologies within your understanding, Chun explained with the patience of a teacher addressing particularly slow students. We've been observing Council military doctrine for over a year. Your tactical responses are remarkably predictable for a civilization that considers itself supreme. High Counselor Mordeth's voice crackled with fury and disbelief. This is an act of war against the sovereign territory of the Galactic Council. You will withdraw your forces immediately or face the full might of our combined fleets. Chen's laugh was genuinely amused. Counselor, we are already at war. You declared it when you demanded our submission. You prosecuted it when you attacked our worlds. You celebrated it when you murdered 47,000 of our people. What we're doing now is simply responding. Vexthera found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What do you want? What we've always wanted, Chen replied. To be left alone. To develop according to our own nature without interference from self-appointed galactic authorities. The difference is that now we're in a position to ensure that happens. The dimensional rift continued to disgorge vessels, and Vexthera realized with growing terror that she was witnessing only a fraction of human naval power. The energy signature suggested that many more rifts were opening throughout Council space, each one releasing fleets that dwarfed the forces that had just conquered the human colonies. You've been planning this, she accused. The whole war was a setup. The war was inevitable the moment your council decided that humanity must submit or die, Chen corrected. We simply chose the terms of engagement rather than allowing you to dictate them. Every battle you won, every tactical success you celebrated, every piece of human technology you captured all of it was designed to reinforce your preconceptions about her capabilities. On her tactical display, Vexthera could see her own fleet being surrounded. The human vessels moved with impossible coordination, their formations suggesting tactical doctrines far beyond anything the Council had encountered. Worse, the energy readings from their weapons suggested firepower that could reduce her entire force to constituent atoms in minutes. The colonists who died today, Chun continued, volunteered for a mission they knew was likely suicidal. They were some of our best and brightest, and they died to sell the deception that you had defeated humanity's primary military force. Their sacrifice ensured that Council attention remained focused on celebrating victory, while our main fleets moved into position. The scope of human planning was staggering. They had sacrificed entire colonies, allowed their own people to die in apparent desperation, all while moving vastly superior forces into position for a counterstrike. The level of strategic thinking required was beyond anything in Council military doctrine. The Council will never surrender to primitives, Mordeth's voice declared, though Vexthera detected the first traces of uncertainty beneath his mechanical tones. We have survived for 12,000 years. We have incorporated hundreds of species. You are nothing but upstart children playing with forces beyond your comprehension. Counselor, Chin's voice took on a tone of infinite patience. I'm going to explain something very important. The forces you're looking at represent approximately 15% of current Terran Federation naval capacity. We have manufacturing facilities in 17 parallel dimensions, industrial platforms around 47 stars you've never heard of, and population centers and solar systems your best scouts haven't discovered. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background hum of ship systems seemed muted as the implications sank in. Chun continued, more importantly, every engagement your forces have had with human vessels has been carefully orchestrated to study your tactics, your technology, your psychology. We now understand your capabilities better than you understand ours. We've had time to prepare specific countermeasures for every weapon system in your arsenal. Admiral Vexthera felt something she hadn't experienced since her earliest days as a junior officer: genuine fear. The humans had outmaneuvered not just her fleet, but the entire Council strategic apparatus. They had turned the galaxy's own arrogance against itself. What are your terms? Mordeth's voice had lost its commanding edge. Simple, Shin replied. Complete withdrawal from all human-controlled systems, including those you've never publicly acknowledged discovering. A formal treaty recognizing the sovereignty of the Terran Federation and all its territories, and reparations for the lives you've taken in your unprovoked attacks on our civilians. Reparations? Vexthera couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. For a defensive action against an aggressive species? Chin's image turned to face her directly, and Vexthera felt as though those human eyes were looking directly into her soul. Admiral, your definition of defensive is interesting. You attacked colony ships full of families. You bombarded civilian settlements. You turned populated worlds into graveyards. And you did it all because we refused to submit to your authority. The human admiral gestured, and the main display shifted to show recordings from the destroyed colonies. Vexthera watched in growing horror as Council forces systematically eliminated evacuation ships, targeted civilian shelters, and pursued fleeing refugees with methodical efficiency. Every one of those people had names, Chin said quietly. Families, dreams, children who will never grow up because you decided their independence was intolerable. You want to talk about aggressive species? Look in a mirror. The recordings continued, showing scene after scene of systematic destruction. Vexthera had been proud of her force's efficiency in eliminating the human threat. Now, seeing it through different eyes, she began to understand how humanity might view the Council's actions. The terms are non-negotiable, Chen announced. Accept them, and this ends here. Refuse them, and we'll demonstrate why the rest of the galaxy should think very carefully before threatening human lives again. High Counselor Mordeth's voice crackled with impotent rage. You dare threaten the Council itself? We represent thousands of species, millions of worlds. Your pathetic little civilization can afford to lose this war, Shin interrupted. Can you? The question hung in the air like a blade. Vexthra looked at her tactical displays, at the massive human fleet surrounding her forces, at the energy signatures that promised destruction beyond imagining. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council faced an opponent that was not only unwilling to submit, but capable of dictating terms. You have 1 hour to decide, Chen announced. After that, we begin Phase 2. What's Phase 2? Vexthra asked, though she dreaded the answer. Chen's smile was terrifyingly gentle. You really don't want to find out. The hour that followed was the longest of Admiral Vexthra's career. Throughout Council space, emergency sessions convened as representatives struggled to comprehend the scope of the crisis. The humans hadn't just presented superior military force. They had fundamentally upended the galaxy's understanding of technological development and strategic thinking. On Nexus Prime, the great amphitheater buzzed with panic as reports flooded in from across Council territory. Human fleets had materialized at every major military installation, trade hub, and population center. The precision of their positioning suggested intelligence-gathering capabilities that made the Council's own surveillance networks seem primitive by comparison. Status report from the Hegemony Sector, announced Councillor Serthak, his 6 arms trembling as he processed incoming data streams. 47 human vessels have appeared around our primary shipyards. They're not attacking, but they're preventing any ships from leaving dock. Similar reports echoed throughout the chamber. The crystalline hierarchy found their mining operations observed by silent human monitors. The Etherian Collective discovered their energy collection stations surrounded by vessels that seemed to absorb rather than deflect their quantum discharges. Even the supposedly impregnable fortress worlds of the Inner Circle found themselves under the watchful gaze of ships that had appeared from nowhere. High Counselor Mordith's mechanical frame sparked with barely contained fury as he processed the implications. How did they achieve this level of coordination? The logistics alone should be impossible for a single-species civilization. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Zenthkol, the Council's chief xenobiologist, had been studying human behavioral patterns since first contact. Her tentacles writhed with distress as she addressed the assembly. Honored counselors, I believe we fundamentally misunderstood human psychology from the beginning. We assumed they thought like us, that their leaders would prioritize the safety of their existing population over abstract principles. We were wrong. She activated a holographic display showing psychological profiles compiled during the diplomatic phase. Humans appear to possess something we lack, the ability to genuinely accept massive personal sacrifice for conceptual goals. When they refused our offer, they weren't just rejecting submission. They were accepting the possibility of species extinction rather than abandoning their independence. Mordeth's optical sensors focused on the data with mechanical precision. Elaborate. The colonists who died in our recent engagements volunteered for their missions, knowing they would likely not survive. They weren't forced into service or manipulated into sacrifice. They chose death over submission because they genuinely believed their independence was worth more than their lives. A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. Most council species had achieved their current status through careful calculation, pragmatic alliances, and the gradual accumulation of advantage. The idea of choosing extinction over subjugation was alien to their thinking. This suggests, Zenthkol continued, that human strategic planning operates on timescales we didn't consider. They weren't planning for the next few years or even decades. They were planning for the survival of their ideological framework across centuries or millennia. The implications were staggering. If humans truly operated with such extended temporal perspectives, their current military position might represent only the opening phase of a much longer strategy. Meanwhile, aboard Vexthra's flagship, the waiting continued. The human fleet maintained perfect formation around the Council forces, their weapons powered but not targeted. It was a display of overwhelming superiority combined with calculated restraint that spoke volumes about human tactical doctrine. "Admiral," reported her sensor operator, "I'm detecting strange energy patterns from the human vessels. It's as if they're charging some kind of exotic weapon system." Vexteros studied the readings with growing alarm. The energy signatures were unlike anything in Council databases, suggesting technological applications that bordered on the theoretical. "Time to full charge." "Unknown, ma'am. The principles involved are beyond our current understanding." A new communication request arrived, this time originating from multiple human vessels simultaneously. When Vextera accepted the transmission, she found herself facing not just Admiral Chun, but a collection of human officers whose ranks and insignia suggested a command structure far more complex than anything the Council had imagined. "Admiral Vextera," Chun began, "I'd like you to meet some of my colleagues. This is Admiral Martinez, commanding the 2nd Expeditionary Fleet. Admiral Nakamura leads our Technological Warfare Division. Admiral Petrov commands our Dimensional Operations Group. And Admiral Singh heads our Intelligence and Strategic Planning Bureau." Each human officer nodded in turn, their expressions professionally neutral. Vextera realized she was looking at a military hierarchy that spanned not just ships and fleets, but entirely different approaches to warfare that the Council hadn't known existed. "The hour is almost up," Chun continued. "Have your superiors reached a decision?" Before Vextera could respond, High Counselor Mordeth's voice crackled across the bridge. "Admiral Chun, the Galactic Council has reached a preliminary decision. We are prepared to negotiate the terms of a ceasefire." Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested disappointment. "Counselor, the time for negotiation passed when your forces opened fire on civilian evacuation ships. What I offered were terms for surrender, not negotiation." "The Council does not surrender," Mordeth declared with mechanical certainty. "Then, you've chosen Phase 2, Chen replied quietly. "Admiral Martinez, initiate Prometheus Protocol." The human officer who had been introduced as Martinez nodded grimly. "Confirmed, Admiral. All fleet commanders, execute Prometheus Protocol on my mark." Vextera's tactical displays suddenly erupted with energy readings that defied comprehension. The human ships were powering weapons that registered power outputs beyond the theoretical maximum for matter-antimatter reactions. The energy levels suggested they were tapping into fundamental forces that the Council considered purely academic. "What are you doing?" Vextera demanded. Admiral Nakamura, the technology specialist, answered with clinical precision, demonstrating the difference between theoretical physics and applied engineering. "Your scientists understand zero-point energy extraction in principle. We've learned to harness it in practice." The space around the human fleet began to ripple with visible distortions as exotic energies built to impossible levels. Sensors throughout the Council fleet screamed warnings about quantum instabilities and space-time fluctuations that threatened the structural integrity of local reality. "You're destabilizing space-time itself," Vextera gasped. "The damage could be irreversible." "Only if we complete the charging sequence," Chen replied calmly. "The choice is yours, Counselor. Accept our terms, or watch us demonstrate why human independence is not negotiable." On Nexus Prime, panic spread through the Council chambers as their own scientists confirmed the readings. Dr. Vexnall, the foremost expert on exotic physics, addressed the assembly with trembling appendages. "Honored counselors, the humans are preparing to weaponize zero-point field fluctuations. If they complete the process, they could theoretically destroy not just our fleets, but the stellar systems themselves. The energy release would be equivalent to controlled supernova events." The silence that followed was absolute. In 12,000 years of expansion and conquest, the Council had never encountered species willing to risk such devastating consequences. The scale of destruction would make entire star systems uninhabitable for millions of years. "This is madness," whispered Counselor Serthak. "They would destroy themselves in the process." Admiral Chen's image appeared throughout the Council chamber as human technology overrode their communication systems with contemptuous ease. Counselor, you still don't understand. We're not positioned here. We're positioned everywhere. Every major council world, every strategic resource, every population center is currently under observation by vessels carrying similar weapon systems. The revelation struck the assembly like a physical blow. The humans weren't threatening mutual destruction. They were threatening the total annihilation of council civilization while keeping their own forces safely positioned in parallel dimensions. You're talking about genocide, more death accused, though his voice had lost its mechanical certainty. I'm talking about the same choice you gave us, Chen replied. Submit or face extinction. The difference is that we're offering you better terms than you offered us. Accept our sovereignty, pay reparations for the damage you've caused, and your civilization continues to exist. Refuse, and we'll ensure that no council species ever threatens another world's independence again. Admiral Singh, the intelligence specialist, stepped forward. We know about the Velnari, reduced to computational slaves after their defeat. We know about the Etherians, their energy patterns harvested to power your stations. We know about the Krexnathi, their world turned into a monument to futility. We know about every species you've incorporated over the last 12,000 years. The human's voice carried undertones of barely contained rage. You've built your civilization on the systematic destruction of independence and diversity. You've turned the galaxy into a stagnant empire where conformity is enforced through overwhelming violence. That ends today. Dr. Zentkol's analysis proved prophetic as the scope of human planning became clear. They hadn't just prepared for military conquest. They had studied the Council's entire history, identified its patterns of oppression, and developed countermeasures not just for its current forces, but for its underlying philosophy. The Prometheus Protocol will remain active until our terms are accepted, Chen announced. You have weapons that can destroy planets. We have weapons that can unmake the fundamental forces that hold matter together. Choose wisely. Vextarov found herself facing a decision that would reshape galactic history. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders that could determine the fate of not just their fleet, but their entire civilization. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that transcended conventional warfare, moving into realms of conflict that threatened the very nature of physical reality. Counselor, she transmitted to Nexus Prime, I recommend immediate acceptance of human terms. The alternatives are unthinkable. The response came not from more death, but from an unexpected source. Counselor Vexnara of the Hegemony, one of the oldest and most conservative members of the Inner Circle, spoke with the weight of millennia behind her words. Admiral Chen, the ancient being's voice carried harmonics of resignation and something that might have been respect. The hegemony acknowledges the superiority of human strategic capabilities. We are prepared to accept your terms. One by one, other council members added their voices to the acceptance. The crystalline representatives, the energy beings, the hive minds, species that had never known defeat began the humbling process of surrender. High Counselor Mordeth's mechanical frame sparked with conflicting imperatives before finally emitting a sound that might have been a sigh. Admiral Chun, the Galactic Council formally accepts your terms. We surrender. The energy buildup around the human fleet began to dissipate, exotic weapons powering down to standby levels. But the ships remained in position, silent sentinels that would ensure compliance with the new galactic order. Wise choice, Chen replied. Now, let's discuss the details of how this galaxy is going to change. 6 months after the surrender, the galaxy was a fundamentally different place. Admiral Vextara stood on the observation deck of her ship, now serving as a liaison vessel in the new order, watching human construction crews work alongside former council engineers on a massive space station. The irony wasn't lost on her that the species she had tried to exterminate was now rebuilding the infrastructure her war had damaged. The Treaty of Soul, as historians were already calling it, had proven far more comprehensive than anyone had initially imagined. The humans hadn't simply demanded independence and reparations. They had insisted on a complete restructuring of galactic civilization along principles that many council species still struggled to understand. The Restoration Initiative is ahead of schedule, reported Captain Zinthara, approaching with a data tablet, displaying construction progress. The Velnari crystalline structures are already showing signs of autonomous regeneration. Their consciousness patterns are stabilizing faster than predicted. Vextera accepted the report with mixed feelings. The restoration of the Velnari had been among the first human demands, followed by similar projects for every species the Council had forcibly incorporated over the millennia. The humans had developed technology that could reverse neural conditioning, restore suppressed cultural patterns, and even rehabilitate entire civilizations that had been reduced to servitude. Any resistance from the reconstruction teams? Less than expected, Zinthara admitted. The former council engineers seemed genuinely enthusiastic about the work. It's as if they'd been waiting for permission to undo what they'd spent centuries building. That was perhaps the most disturbing revelation to emerge from the New Order. As human psychologists began studying council civilization, they'd uncovered evidence that many species had never truly embraced the imperial model. They had simply lacked the power to resist it, and, over time, had convinced themselves that submission was natural. A chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Admiral Chen's image materialized in the air before them, no longer wearing the military uniform that had become famous across the galaxy, but rather the simple robes of her new position as Director of Galactic Restructuring. Admiral Vextera, Chun greeted with professional warmth that had replaced the cold efficiency of wartime. I have an update on the reparations program that might interest you. The reparations had proven to be unlike anything in galactic history. Rather than demanding resources or territory, the humans had insisted on something far more valuable and harder to provide: knowledge. Every council species had been required to share their complete historical records, technological databases, and cultural archives with a vast human-administered network. The hegemony archives have yielded fascinating results, Chen continued. It appears your people once possessed philosophical traditions that emphasized individual autonomy and creative expression. The imperial conditioning suppressed these traits, but they're still present in your genetic memory patterns. Vextera felt something stir in her consciousness that she couldn't quite identify. Since the surrender, many council species had reported similar experiences: the gradual emergence of thoughts, feelings, and perspectives that seemed foreign yet familiar. The humans claimed these were ancestral patterns reasserting themselves as imperial conditioning broke down. Dr. Vexnall has requested permission to begin consciousness restoration procedures with volunteer subject from your species, Chen added. The early results with other species suggest the process is both safe and enlightening. The consciousness restoration procedures had become one of the most controversial aspects of human policy. Using technology that bordered on the mystical, human scientists could apparently unlock suppressed aspects of individual and species-wide psychology. Volunteers emerged from the process changed, often radically so, but universally reported feeling more themselves than they ever had before. I'll consider it, Vextera replied, though she knew her curiosity was already making the decision for her. Take your time, Chen smiled. We've learned patience. Speaking of which, I wanted to update you on the independence referendum results. That was the other revolutionary aspect of human policy. Rather than simply dismantling the council by force, they had instituted a galaxy-wide democratic process. Every species, every world, every population group was being given the opportunity to choose their own future. The options ranged from complete independence to voluntary association in new cooperative frameworks. The results continue to surprise everyone, Chen reported. 87% of surveyed populations have chosen some form of independence or autonomous governance. Only 13% have voted to maintain traditional council authority structures, and most of those are requesting significant reforms. The numbers represented the collapse of an empire that had seemed eternal. 12,000 years of expansion and conquest undone by the simple act of asking people what they actually wanted. The most interesting development, Chun continued, is the emergence of new cooperative agreements between former council species. The Etherians and the crystalline hierarchy have formed a research partnership to study exotic energy applications. The Hive Queens are working with the gas giant dwellers to develop new forms of distributed consciousness. It's as if removing the imperial structure has unleashed creativity that was suppressed for millennia. Vextra nodded, though she was still processing the implications. What about Earth? Humanity's role in all this? Chen's expression grew thoughtful. That's the question everyone keeps asking. The truth is, we never wanted to rule the galaxy. We just wanted to be left alone to develop according to our own nature. Now that we've ensured that can happen, we're stepping back. It was true. Despite their overwhelming military superiority, the humans had shown no interest in replacing the Council with a human-dominated empire. Instead, they were gradually withdrawing their fleets, maintaining only enough presence to ensure compliance with the treaty terms. The Federation Council is meeting next week to discuss the final phase of withdrawal, Chen explained. Within 5 years, human military presence in former Council space will be reduced to a monitoring force. Within 10 years, even that will be voluntary. Any world that wants us to leave will simply need to ask. The approach was so fundamentally different from traditional conquest that many species still struggled to believe it. Empires expanded and absorbed territory. They didn't conquer civilizations only to hand power back to their former enemies. There is one matter I wanted to discuss with you personally. Chen's tone grew more serious. We're creating a new institution, the Galactic Historical Preservation Society. Its mission will be to document the real history of the last 12,000 years, including perspectives that were suppressed under Council rule. She paused, studying Vextara's expression. We'd like you to serve as one of the founding directors. The offer was stunning. Me? But I was responsible for the destruction of human colonies. I ordered the deaths of thousands of your people. You were following orders in a system that gave you no real choice, Chen replied gently. More importantly, you were an eyewitness to events that need to be remembered accurately. The new galaxy we're building can't afford to forget the mistakes of the past. It was another example of human thinking that defied conventional logic. Rather than punishing former enemies, they were offering them positions of responsibility in the new order. The approach had proven remarkably effective. Former council officials who had expected execution or imprisonment instead found themselves invited to help build something better. The goal isn't revenge, Chen continued, reading Vextara's thoughts with unsettling accuracy. The goal is to ensure this never happens again. That means understanding how it happened in the first place, and that requires perspectives from people who were part of the system. A soft chime indicated another incoming transmission. This one carried the authentication codes of the restored Velnari Republic, one of the first civilizations to complete the reconstruction process. A figure materialized beside Chen's image, tall, crystalline, and radiating patterns of light that spoke of complex thoughts and emotions. When the Velnari spoke, their voice carried harmonics that had been absent during their centuries of servitude. Admiral Chun, director of Vexara, the crystalline being's form shifted through patterns that expressed gratitude in ways words couldn't convey. I am Shardsinger Velneth, elected representative of the restored Velnari Republic. I wanted to personally thank both of you for making our freedom possible. Vextara felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring in her chest. During the conquest of Velnari space 3 centuries ago, she had been a junior officer following orders to suppress the crystalline being's rebellion. She had never questioned the righteousness of that action until now. I was part of the force that enslaved your people, she said quietly. And I was part of the system that ordered that enslavement, Velneth replied, their crystalline form pulsing with what seemed to be understanding rather than anger. We have learned that cycles of revenge only perpetuate suffering. The humans have taught us something our people had forgotten during our centuries of bondage, that justice isn't about punishment. It's about restoration. The philosophical implications were staggering. Here was a being whose people had suffered for centuries, choosing understanding over vengeance. It was a pattern being repeated across the galaxy as formerly oppressed civilizations emerge from human restoration programs. The Velnari Republic has voted to join the new cooperative research initiative, Velneth continued. Our crystalline matrix technology, combined with human dimensional manipulation and Etherian energy fields, may provide solutions to problems we never imagined we could solve. Shen nodded approvingly. The CRI is already showing remarkable results. Preliminary studies suggest we might be able to develop faster-than-light communication without relativistic delays, create sustainable energy sources that don't require stellar-scale engineering, and even develop medical technologies that can extend lifespans across species barriers. The possibilities seemed endless, free from the imperial imperative to suppress innovation that might threaten central authority. The galaxy species were rediscovering their capacity for collaborative creativity. There's something else, Chen added, her expression growing more serious. Our deep space reconnaissance has detected signals from beyond the galactic rim. We're not alone in the universe, and it appears we may not be the only aggressive civilization out there. The implications were sobering. If humanity's analysis was correct, the galaxy might face threats that would require the kind of unity the Council had tried to enforce through oppression. The difference, Chen explained, is that now we'll face those threats as free beings choosing to cooperate, rather than as subjects forced to obey. History suggests that makes us far more formidable than any empire could be. As if to emphasize the point, reports began flowing in from across the galaxy. The restored species were voluntarily sharing technologies, resources, and knowledge at unprecedented rates. Former enemies were becoming research partners. Ancient grievances were being set aside in favor of collaborative projects that benefited everyone. Vextra looked out at the construction work proceeding around the station and realized she was watching the birth of something genuinely new in galactic history. Not an empire built on conquest, not a federation held together by mutual fear, but a voluntary association of free beings choosing to work together. Admiral Chun, she said finally, I accept your offer to join the Historical Preservation Society. And I'd like to volunteer for the consciousness restoration procedure as well. Chen's smile was radiant. Welcome to the future, Vexthara. It's going to be quite an adventure. As the transmission ended, Vexthara stood alone with her thoughts, watching the galaxy rebuild itself. The Council had rejoiced at Earth's apparent defeat, but in their moment of triumph, they had missed the most important truth of all. Sometimes the greatest victory comes through apparent surrender, and the mightiest weapon is the willingness to sacrifice everything for principle. Humanity had taught the galaxy that freedom was worth any price, even extinction. In doing so, they had given every other species the courage to choose that same freedom for themselves. The Empire was dead, but from its ashes was rising something far more beautiful and far more powerful than any single civilization could ever be. The age of empires was ending. The age of cooperation had begun.